Why did the room go silent the moment she touched that radio? It wasn't broken. Not really. Just tired like the soldiers around it, like the ground they walked on, like the war itself. But she didn't rush, didn't bark orders or posture like the others always did. She simply breathed, pressed her thumb along the frayed wire, and listened, as if machines spoke a language only she remembered. And in that moment, even the dust seemed to settle. No one noticed her when she walked into the command post that morning. A quiet corporal with sand-scratched boots, sleeves rolled, hair tied back tight enough to hide the years carved into her eyes. She moved past Marines loud enough to fill a city block, past lieutenants too young to hide their arrogance, past radio operators who never bothered to ask why she always worked in silence. To most, she was the cable girl. To outsiders, a technician. To soldiers who measured worth by noise, she was nothing but background, the person who tightened screws while others tightened triggers, who drank burnt coffee alone while they compared stories about things she had lived and never spoken of. But today, something hung in the air, a tension that felt like the pause before a fight. The desert heat pressed against canvas walls, radios hissed with static like restless breathing, and a briefing map lay sprawled across a field desk, circles marking danger zones no one had yet stepped into. She wiped her hands, the tiny scar on her wrist catching the light pale and thin like a ghost of another life. No one asked about it. They never did. Instead, they smirked. They always smirked. "Cable girl, fix my Xbox next," a private murmured to laughter. She heard it, she always did. She just never gave them the satisfaction of reacting. Because anger was loud. Strength was. She crouched beside the radio rack, screwdriver rolling against her thumb, old, worn, carved by time and someone else's life before hers. Her father's. Vietnam. Radios in jungles thick with rot and fear. The kind of war where a single working frequency meant men made it home or didn't. The right tool in the right hands can save lives, he once told her. She believed him then. She believed him now. Even if the world here pretended not to. They didn't see the quiet discipline in her movements, the way she scanned the room before touching equipment, the way she positioned her body so operators always remained in peripheral view. They didn't see how her gaze lingered half a second on every weapon rack, every exit, every blind angle. They didn't see a soldier. They saw a task. Invisible until needed. But machines always need something eventually. And when they broke, the same boots that had walked past her without a glance suddenly hovered near, impatient, annoyed, demanding help they never respected. She never resented them. Not truly. What she did resent, what she carried like desert dust under skin, was how men here laughed with the confidence of those who never truly bled. Soldiers who never looked beyond rank insignias or job titles. Men who believed war was only won by those who kicked down doors. If only they knew how wrong they were. A burst of static snapped through the tent. Voices cut, scrambled, then died. Someone cursed. Chairs scraped. Panic stirred like wind and sand. And she reached forward, calm, steady, touching the radio casing like a medic checking a pulse. Her fingers traced wires, her breath slow despite the sudden chaos rising around her. "Let it handle it," a corporal barked. She didn't look up. "It can't hear what this machine's trying to say," she murmured. Not defiant. Just honest. Another voice scoffed. "Woman thinks the radio talks to her." But the dial clicked under her fingertips, a soft mechanical heartbeat returning. She adjusted a frequency, tuned noise into meaning, and the line crackled back alive, voices pulsing through, urgent, scared, real. "A convoy. Contact reported." Not close, not yet, but close enough that the command tent stiffened. Officers leaned over the map, marking positions, barking into headsets. And there she was, the only calm in a room full of rattled nerves and forced authority. She finished her repair, dusted her palms, and stepped back to her corner, as invisible as she had arrived. No thank you. No nod. Not even eye contact. And she preferred it that way. Recognition was a burden. Silence was armor. Because she remembered a time when recognition came too quickly, wearing a headset in a valley where mountains swallowed screams and fire rained like judgment. When her voice steadied men older and braver than her, calling out coordinates through blood and dirt as she kept an entire platoon breathing with nothing but grit and God, and a frequency only she could hold steady. They didn't know that story here. She didn't tell it. Stories like that belonged to ghosts. Hey, someone muttered near the entrance, breaking her thoughts. Where's she from anyway? She always looks like she's listening to something the rest of us can't hear. What ghosts? Another laughed. She ignored them, but her jaw clenched, barely. They didn't know she had listened to ghosts before. Men fatting into static mid-sentence. Breaths turning into rustling silence. Voices cut off not by malfunction, but by finality. Those memories lived behind her eyes, in the quiet places no one could reach, and she never invited them into. She lifted her mug, cold by now, always cold by the time she reached it. Across the room, a squad prepared to head beyond the wire. They packed magazines, checked optics, tightened chin straps, rituals of men who believed violence answered every question. She watched them without expression. Not judgment. Not envy. Just understanding. Sometimes the loudest warriors are masking their fear. Sometimes the quietest ones already made peace with it. One Marine caught her watching and scoffed. You coming with us, cable girl, gonna throw Ethernet cables at the Taliban. Laughter. She didn't answer. She could have said she'd walked ridges far harsher than these. Breath, gunpowder, and dust until both tasted the same. Spoken coordinates through trembling lips while rockets screamed overhead. But those who know don't need to say it. And those who don't wouldn't understand. The squad left. Boots echoing down gravel. Hushed prayers disguised as jokes trailing behind. The tent returned to its heartbeat, hum of generators, hiss of radios, scratching of pens across battle maps. She leaned back against a wall, breath steady, posture relaxed yet ready, always ready, because readiness was not a switch you flipped. It was something war carved into bone. Her fingers brushed her pocket. The screwdriver. Her father's. His dog tags pressed against her chest beneath the uniform fabric, cool metal against warm skin. He didn't get saluted when he came home. Different war. Different wounds. His ghost still sat at dinner with them long after he returned, silent, heavy, omnipresent. When he died, she enlisted not to honor him, but to carry the weight he didn't know how to put down gently. And sometimes she wondered if she inherited his ghosts too, or created her own. A radio tone cut through her thoughts. A voice with urgency. A tremor of fear buried but not hidden. Then static. Then silence. She closed her eyes briefly. Something was coming. A shift. A moment that would reveal everything and rewrite every assumption in this tent. But she breathed. Slow. Calm. Because storms never frightened those who had already lived inside one. And as the first crackle of panic began to ripple through the room, she did what she always did. She moved toward the threat, not away. Quiet feet. Quiet purpose. Quiet strength. She didn't look like the warrior they thought they wanted. She was the one they needed. They just didn't know it yet. And when the truth arrived, when ranks and arrogance and ignorance broke under reality, it wouldn't come with gunfire. It would come with a salute. The kind given only once in a lifetime. The kind that changes every pair of eyes watching. The kind no one in that room would ever forget. But that moment wasn't here yet. Not yet. For now, she just reached for another cable, calm, steady, while the world quietly shifted without realizing it. Because sometimes, history doesn't start with an explosion. Sometimes, it begins with a woman tightening a wire while everyone else underestimates her. And war, like pride, never sees the quiet ones coming. She stood alone at the edge of the tent, but what came next, no one expected. For a moment, the desert evening felt still. Too still. Wind hummed low along the plywood barriers outside, tugging at the loose corners of tarp. A radio tech across the room smacked his headset in irritation, thinking he'd lost signal again. A lieutenant leaned over a map as if starring harder made war simpler. Sarah Whitaker watched everything. Not with nerves, with awareness. It was the difference. Nerves flinch, awareness waits. Her thumb brushed the edge of her father's screwdriver, a grounding habit carved over years. Danger comes, breathe once, act deliberately. She had learned that long before she ever touched a military radio, learned it when life first demanded stillness in chaos, not theatrics. Then it hit. A burst of static carved through the comms. Short, sharp, urgent. Taking fire. Route red. Vehicles disabled. Multiple wounded. The radio strangled the transmission mid-sentence. Silence. Then voices. Raised, confused, fear bleeding through forced authority. The command tent erupted. Chairs scraped. Boots stomped. Maps unfurled, hands shaking more than pencils marking routes. A major's voice cracked. We lost them, re-established now. Someone fired off orders into a dead headset, louder every second, as if volume equaled control. A junior sergeant knocked over a cup of coffee, curses tripping into nervous breaths. And in all that, Sarah didn't move fast. She moved precise. Her hand drifted to the panel, palm resting on metal as if feeling a pulse. She leaned in, listening not to noise, but to what wasn't there. Silence is information too. She had learned that in the valley, where quiet meant someone wasn't breathing anymore. A captain barked, "Tech, fix it." One of the operators rushed forward, fumbling at wires he didn't understand, sweat pooling under his collar. "Stop," her voice was calm, too calm. The tech froze, confused by the tone, not the words. She crouched beside the rack, adjusting posture like she'd done it on dirt floors under mortar dust, and not inside a tent with fluorescent lights. Click. Unplug. Switch. Dial. Breathe. Backup frequency, she murmured. Reroute here, your main's compromised. The lieutenant blinked. You can't know that. Static came alive, cracked, sputtered, fought. Then a voice bled through. This is Bravo convoy, we are pinned. The room jolted. Sarah didn't look up. Her brow stayed furrowed, wrist turning, screwdriver twisting a life back into the line. Signals sharpened. Coordinates spilled. Voices returned, voices thick with adrenaline and pain. We need medevac, under small arms and RPG fire. Everything accelerated. Every head snapped toward her. Orders stuttered midair. It wasn't just that she fixed comms. It was how she did it. No hesitation. No guessing. No fear. Like she'd done it before, under worse. A captain stared, confusion tugging at disbelief. Who trained you like that? No answer. Her eyes stayed on the radio, adjusting gain. Soldiers paused, some swallowed hard. Because if you've ever seen someone who has survived hell, you recognize the stillness. Someone called her name, half question, half accusation. Whitaker, what did you just do? She didn't explain. Explanations felt like weakness. People who talk too much on comms die fast. The ones who live conserve breath for truth. And truth, when it comes, rarely needs volume. Outside, alarms echoed, response units scrambling, engines rumbling awake. The base was shifting from routine to danger-ready, but inside that tent, every pair of eyes stayed pinned to her. One Marine, one who mocked her the loudest earlier, whispered, "How the hell did she know that?" Another shook his head, "Lucky guess." Lucky never looks like muscle memory. Sarah finally stepped back. Let the officers handle orders now. Let the lieutenants scramble markers, the captains project confidence over growing dread. Her role for now was done. She returned to her corner. Calm, quiet, invisible again, except now invisibility felt chosen, not imposed. But memory stings, and prejudice doesn't evaporate with one miracle. A private muttered, low but not low enough. She got lucky, still just cable girl. Someone elbowed him, not jokingly this time. A shift, small but real. Respect doesn't arrive like a salute. It arrives in hesitation, the space before someone speaks doubt again. But doubt still lingered. A colonel approached her, stiff jaw, stiff tone. "Where did you learn to switch TOC comms like that? That's advanced joint radio work." Her answer was simple. "Training. Training." She could have told him the night a Black Hawk clipped a ridge line and went down. She could have told him how she kept calling through gunfire and loss until her voice cracked and someone finally answered, forming chaos into extraction. But stories like that weren't told. They lived behind ribs and night sweats and the quiet power of stillness. Instead, she lifted her radio again, checking settings. Convoy needs a medevac corridor. The ridge lines a kill funnel. The colonel blinked. "You speak Dari?" "No." "Pashto." Silence. Her silence was answer enough. He took a step back. Because men with bars on their chest don't intimidate people who have already faced death and learned it listens just as closely as life does. Someone else finally voiced the question hanging like dust in the heat. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The battlefield outside hadn't even begun showing its hand, but here, in this tent, the war of perception had already cracked open. Soon someone outside yelled, "SEAL team inbound to TOC." Heads turned. Air shifted. Boots sounded heavier, purpose, not swagger. Sarah's pulse didn't quicken. She knew exactly what was coming. And dreaded it. Not because of fear. Because truth meant losing anonymity, the fragile sanctuary built from being overlooked. A quiet life in shadows ending with one word, one recognition, one salute that wasn't for show, wasn't performative, wasn't optional. She steadied her breathing. Flexed her scarred wrist once. Touched the screwdriver, ritual memory. Then she felt it, that old weight, the one she hadn't carried since the valley. Recognition is heavier than silence. A ripple of footsteps approached. Measured, experienced. The kind of stride that doesn't pretend to be confident, it is. The tent flap lifted. A man stepped in, dusty boots, subdued trident patch on his sleeve, jaw set with exhaustion, only combat carves. His eyes scanned the room not in curiosity but in assessment, landing on chaos, mapping threat, commanding without speaking. But when he saw her, really saw her, his breath caught. A shift in his stance. A flicker in hardened eyes. Whitaker. Quiet. Not a question, a revelation. Head snapped. Fingers paused midair. Doubt shattered. She didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't rise. She just lifted her gaze, calm, meeting recognition. Her greatest fear wasn't that they would never see her. It was that they would. The room froze as the SEAL captain stepped forward, not toward rank, not toward authority. Toward respect. Real respect. Earned in fire. Forged in silence. Remembered by men who survived, because she did her job too well to ever talk about it. He stopped inches from her, and for a heartbeat, the war outside disappeared. Only truth lived here now, unhidden, undeniable. He drew in a breath. You still keeping comms running in the corners of rooms, Whitaker? Her reply was steady. Yes, sir. After what you did. A soft scoff, disbelief, admiration, grief all braided into one sound. You're wasting that talent here. She didn't flinch. Didn't apologize for choosing quiet over glory. Sometimes quiet is safer. For who, he asked. She didn't answer. Because the truth was simple. Quiet was safer for her heart. Not for the world that once leaned on her voice to survive. Before anyone else could speak, the radio crackled again, screams, gunfire, desperation. Reality yanked the moment back. War doesn't wait for emotional resolution. And neither did she. Sarah reached for the headset. Calm. Unshaken. Chosen. Patch them through, I've got it. No one argued. Not now. Not ever again. Outside, somewhere beyond walls and wire, men fought to breathe. Inside, one woman exhaled steadily, picking up a ghost she once laid down. Sometimes greatness hides in plain sight. Sometimes valor goes quiet. Sometimes soldiers forget the weight one voice can carry. And sometimes, like now, they remember. She didn't realize she had gripped the radio handset so tightly until her knuckles turned pale, not from fear, but from restraint. Old instincts wanted to take over completely. Command, direct, shield, survive. But here she was still supposed to be just the comms tech. A shadow in a corner. A quiet ghost holding wires instead of lives. Yet ghosts don't stay buried forever. The next transmission cut the breath out of the room. We have wounded. Contact intensifying. We're boxed in. Gunfire crackled through the speakers, sharp, relentless, too close. A Marine officer leaned toward the console, breath shallow. Get their grid now. But Sarah already had it. She didn't even need the map. She could hear terrain in their voices, feel distance in static, taste urgency like metal on her tongue. She adjusted frequencies, isolating channels until voices sharpened. One soldier screamed. Another shouted coordinates. A medic cursed through gritted teeth. Someone in the tent whispered, God help them. Sarah's voice rose, calm and clipped. Patch medevac on standby. Send 2 rotary wing with gun support. Route through East Ridge. Mark alternate LZ. A lieutenant blinked. You're not in charge here. She didn't look at him. She didn't have to. I'm not giving orders. I'm telling you physics. If they go valley route, they die. The SEAL captain beside her didn't speak. He just stared, not in suspicion, but in recognition. The look of someone remembering the exact cadence of calm you hear when chaos chooses a single person to anchor itself to. Then the convoy commander screamed through comms again, desperate, ragged. They're flanking us. Sarah's hand gripped the table, a subtle tremor, not fear, memory. Helmand Valley, dust turned red, voices fatting until only hers was left. She pushed that ghost back. Breath steady. Words truthful. You're not flanked yet. You still have a window. How do you, the lieutenant started, but the captain cut him off. She knows, listen to her. Silence swallowed the room. Rank bowed to experience. Sarah leaned into the mic, voice low, firm, almost gentle. Bravo convoy, hold your position. Mark smoke on your 6, not your front. Reinforcements inbound. Do not break formation. Repeat, do not break. There was hesitation on the line, then trust. Copy holding. Trust. Hardest currency in any war. A moment later, A roar of engines echoed faintly from outside as medevac birds spun up on the flight line, blades carving into the hot night air. The whole base shifted into motion, lives depending on timing, timing depending on clarity, clarity dripping from one silent woman who never asked for credit. While everyone moved, she stood still, the eye in the storm. Inside her chest, something stirred. Not pride, not fear. Memory, the kind that visits without permission. Her pulse synced with the thump of rotor blades, the same rhythm she lived by years ago, kneeling beside bleeding men, whispering coordinates while rounds snapped overhead. One officer murmured near her, barely audible. "She's doing more with a radio than half a battalion could with rifles." Another whispered, "Why didn't we know who she was?" "Because she didn't need them to." Because some people hide not out of weakness, but because peace feels foreign after surviving war. She felt the SEAL captain watching her, not judging, just remembering a battlefield she pulled him through. His voice dropped low, quiet enough only she could hear. "You could have been running operations by now." She paused. "I had enough of leading. And yet here you are again." She stared ahead. "Some habits don't die." He exhaled through his nose, half sigh, half respect. Outside, rotors thundered. Inside, radios crackled. Then boom! The command tent vibrated. Dirt plumed outside. Someone shouted indirect fire. A mortar somewhere close, too close. The base alarm wailed, lights flickering red. Adrenaline surged. Soldiers scrambled for cover. Someone dove under a desk. The SEAL captain stayed still. So did she. Stillness like that doesn't come from courage. It comes from already surviving worse. Red alarm lights washed her face, calm in chaos, eyes steady, jaw set. The way she had looked the night she held men's voices together through smoke and blood and crumbling earth. Another explosion in the distance, closer to the gates this time. The lieutenant stuttered, Should we evacuate?" "No." She didn't raise her voice, didn't have to. "They're probing. They're trying to force us to lose comms and panic, stay on mission. They want chaos. Don't give them satisfaction." The SEAL captain nodded, confirming her truth without a single rank word spoken. A Marine who once mocked her swallowed hard. Shame in his eyes. Fear too, but mostly awe. Everyone returned to positions. The base still shook. Sirens still wailed. But the tent stayed steady, because one person stayed steady. Sarah leaned over the map, fingers tracing terrain without hesitation. If they hit again, it will be near the east gate. They're timing distraction, not damage. A colonel stepped forward. "How do you know that?" She didn't look up. "Patterns don't change, just landscapes." That sentence floated like smoke, heavy with truth only those who lived enough war could shape. And then, over the radio. "Birds inbound, marking LZ. We see movement on the ridge." Static. Gunfire. Another voice yelling, "Taking rounds, they're trying to bracket us." Sarah inhaled slowly. For one heartbeat, she closed her eyes. And when she opened them, the war she'd buried was alive again. She picked up the mic, steady, unwavering. "Bravo convoy, hold fire on ridge line. Friendly air inbound. Pop purple smoke only, confirm purple." Purple confirmed. "Gunships sweep left ridge 300 meters stagger. Do not cross center axis. Friendlies close." The pilot responded instantly, like muscle memory answering her cadence. "Copy sweeping." Rotors thundered. Machine guns thundered louder. The earth hummed with power and violence and purpose. She set the mic down carefully. Not triumphant. Not shaken. Just breathing. The radio crackled again. This time quieter. Softer. Almost human. "Thanks TOC. Wouldn't be alive without you." She didn't respond. She couldn't. Her throat tightened, not because she doubted, but because she remembered. Remembered every time someone whispered that same gratitude in the dark before a medevac whisked them away, and she never saw them again. The room didn't clap, didn't cheer. Real soldiers don't cheer in survival. They just understand. One Marine near her finally whispered, voice fragile, "How long have you been doing this?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The answer was in the dust on her boots, the scar on her wrist, the tattoo on her arm, the way her silence spoke louder than an entire base full of shouting. She stood straighter. Not bigger, just straighter. The SEAL captain almost smiled, tired, proud, sad. "You belong in the fight more than any of them know," he whispered. She stared at the map, voice quiet enough to dissolve into air. "I didn't come here to fight." He nodded slowly. "But war has a way of finding those who can end it." Her fingers brushed the screwdriver again, relic, anchor, reminder. Outside, the base alarm finally ceased. Inside, the radio settled into steady hum. Yet every soldier in the room knew one truth. The quiet girl in the corner was not who they thought. Not by rank. Not by rumor. Not by limitation. Not anymore. And when the world learned her story, when the final salute came, they would remember this moment as the turning point. The moment they stopped seeing a cable girl and started seeing the soldier who once held death at bay with nothing but her voice and her will. Why did her hands feel heavier now, even though all she held was air? The mission wasn't over, not for the convoy, not for the pilots, and certainly not for her. But as the alarms faded and the red lights clicked back to normal glow, a weight settled over the command post, a silent understanding that the ground had shifted. Something unspoken had surfaced, and no one knew what to do with it yet. Sarah stood still, staring at the radio console. Not frozen, calculating. War teaches people to react. Experience teaches them to wait. Someone behind her exhaled shakily, like they'd been holding breath since the first mortar hit. Boots shuffled. Pages rustled. A map corner fluttered in the AC breeze. But no one spoke her name. No one dared, not after hearing her speak into that mic like she'd been born with war wired into her spine. She didn't want their awe. She wanted nothing. Silence felt safer than praise. A Marine she barely recognized approached, hands twitching like he wasn't sure what to do with them. He cleared his throat. You did good." She didn't look up. Didn't smile. Just nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement possible. The Marine backed away, relieved she hadn't scolded him or ignored him completely. But what he really feared wasn't rejection, it was exposure. He'd seen enough to know that whatever she carried, he wasn't ready to know the weight of it. The SEAL captain remained by her shoulder, arms crossed loosely, not guarding her, not hovering, simply existing in shared history. "You took control back there," he said quietly. "You always did." She didn't turn to him. She didn't want memories cracking open any more than they already had. "I did my job," she answered. "And you never took credit." "That wasn't the job." He studied her profile, the calm jaw, the steady gaze, the quiet defiance in living small after living big. A soldier hiding in plain sight. A warrior pretending not to be one. "You still don't know how to accept being seen, do you?" he said. Her throat tightened. She swallowed it down. Visibility attracts noise. Noise kills. It was the most honest sentence she'd spoken all deployment. He nodded once, slow. Not agreement, recognition. Before either could say more, a corporal rushed in, breath fast. "Sir, Captain, they're staging QRF for a push outside the wire, requesting air support and JTAC oversight." The SEAL captain turned, instinct ready. Sarah, she didn't move. The corporal blurted, eyes flicking between them, confused by hierarchy that didn't match rank patches. They asked if the JTAC on site could assist. Silence collapsed the room. Her chest tightened. Her pulse slowed, not panic but decision. She could speak. She could step forward. She could move into that place again, the place where lives hung on her words like scripture, where she dictated death and salvation in single breaths, where she was seen, where she was needed. Or she could stay in this corner. Invisible. Safe. Safe was a lie. Safety never really existed after your soul had tasted fire. She felt every eye rooting for an answer. Then she exhaled slowly, once long. Steadier than most lungs could manage under pressure. "Send Lieutenant Malone," she said softly. "Let him handle it." The corporal blinked. "But he needs the experience," she replied. "He'll do fine." That sentence wasn't strategy, it was armor. Because stepping back into a fire you crawled out of once, that wasn't bravery. Sometimes it was relapse. The captain didn't argue. He simply studied her in silence. The unspoken question lingered in his eyes. Are you refusing the call? Or saving yourself from drowning in it again? He didn't press. He knew better than most. Some scars reopen with just one radio keyed on the wrong frequency. But outside, soldiers were already gearing up, rifles rattling, boots stomping, adrenaline climbing. And as the QRF rolled toward the gate, she heard a private whisper to his buddy. Damn shame she's stuck behind a desk. She should have ignored it. She had mastered that art. But tonight, after voices and war ghosts filled her ears again, the whisper pierced. She turned her head just enough to see them. They froze. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. "Being behind a desk doesn't make you safe," she said quietly. "It just gives you a front row seat to every life you can't save." The tent went still. The private swallowed hard. She returned to her console, a quiet corner, wires humming like heartbeats. Her fingers brushed her father's screwdriver again, still warm from her grip, still the anchor she never let go. The SEAL captain finally broke the silence. "You didn't send Malone because he needs experience." "No. You sent him because if you went." His voice dropped, understanding, not accusation. "You wouldn't come back the same." She didn't deny it. He took a slow breath. "You think hiding keeps you whole." "Hiding keeps me alive," she corrected softly. He shook his head, a sad, resigned smile on his lips. "You're not hiding, Whitaker, you're healing. There's a difference." Her jaw clenched, not stubbornness but pain swallowed whole. Healing. Such a gentle word for what war leaves behind. Through the tent flap, she watched QRF vehicles disappear in dust. Her chest tightened again, not from fear for them, but from memory of every time she'd watched someone ride out and prayed they returned. A long moment passed before she spoke again. "You ever think," she murmured, voice almost lost under equipment hum, "that the quiet after combat is harder than the combat itself?" He nodded once. "Because in the fight you know who you are," he said. "Out here, the world keeps moving and you're afraid you won't fit back in." Her eyes flicked to him, a shard of truth hitting too close. "That's not weakness, Whitaker," he continued. "It's the cost." She swallowed, looked away. War wasn't the hard part. Coming home was. And she wasn't home, but she wasn't in the fight either. She was in the in-between. A no-man's land of the soul. She didn't belong anywhere, yet somehow, she belonged to every soldier who ever sat in silence, unsure if survival was blessing or burden. Outside, gunfire echoed far away, faint but real. Inside, radios pulsed. Duty hummed around her. And still she stood rooted, not by fear, but by a fragile thread holding her sanity in place. But fate never leaves warriors resting for long. A new voice crackled through the radio, urgent, strained, not from convoy but from base security. TOC, be advised, unknown movement along south perimeter. Possible infiltration attempt. Heads lifted. Hands froze. The SEAL captain stiffened. Sarah's fingers moved on instinct, flipping frequency, clearing interference, filtering noise. Her heartbeat steadied into that dangerous old rhythm. Not again, she thought. But destiny rarely cares what we want. A young Marine sergeant looked at her, truly looked, not with arrogance but with newfound understanding. "What do we do?" he asked. For the first time since stepping into this base, they weren't just asking for technical input. They were asking because they trusted her. Sarah closed her eyes 1 second, one breath grounding herself. When she opened them, her voice was even, controlled, almost gentle. "You stay calm," she said. "Panic hands the enemy the fight." Weapons were checked. Positions shifted. Heart steadied. Her gaze drifted to the door, toward the desert night where danger waited. Her father once told her, the right tool in the right hands can save lives. Tonight she realized something. Sometimes the tool wasn't the radio. Sometimes it wasn't the gun. Sometimes it was a voice. A presence. A person who didn't break even when breaking felt inevitable. The south perimeter crackled with movement again, closer this time. She stepped forward without thinking. Not hiding. Not healing. Answering. She didn't grab a rifle. She grabbed a headset. Because some soldiers don't fight with bullets. Some fight by making sure others don't die without reason. And she wasn't done fighting, not yet. Not while soldiers still breathed, because she whispered calm into chaos. Behind her, the SEAL captain smiled, proud, tired, knowing. "Welcome back," he murmured. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Her silence was her oath. She didn't hear her heartbeat, she felt it. Low, heavy, controlled. The way a soldier's pulse settles not in calm, but in acceptance. Outside, the night tightened around the base like a fist. Inside, tension coiled through the command tent, electric, silent, waiting. A perimeter alarm blinked. Just one light. Small. In another world, forgettable. But here, it meant everything. A young Marine leaned toward the monitor, voice cracking. Movement on thermal south wall. Could be wildlife, could be. Sarah spoke before he finished. "It's not wildlife." Not confident tone. Certain tone. The tone of someone who had heard footsteps in sand before and knew exactly how intent sounded, even when carried by dust and darkness. "Confirm again," the watch officer ordered, masking nerves with volume. Sarah's fingers moved faster than thought. Switch. Magnify. Filter heat bloom. Reduce background noise. 3 shapes. Low, controlled pace. Spacing tight enough for discipline, not panic. They weren't running. They weren't lost. They were hunting. "South Tower," Sarah called softly, pressing her headset. "Eyes on your 8 o'clock. Maintain cover. Do not illuminate." The tower guard froze, obeying not orders but instinct. Her instinct. Across the tent, someone whispered, "She shouldn't know how to call that." Someone else muttered back, "At this point, do you care?" And that right there was the moment the room truly shifted. Not when she fixed radios. Not when she read enemy chatter like song lyrics. Not even when the SEAL captain recognized her. It shifted now. When men armed with rifles looked at a woman with no weapon in her hand and decided they trusted her judgment over their rank. "QRF is out. We're thin on perimeter response," the watch officer said. Thin. No one likes that word here. Sarah didn't flinch. She scanned radios and towers, mapping voices, timing breaths. Because war isn't always explosions, sometimes it's breath control. Tower 2, hold, she murmured. Overwatch team, stay dark. Do not engage. Her voice dipped quieter, lower, a thread pulling the room together. If they don't know we see them, we have control. A corporal exhaled in relief. Someone else whispered, she's running the TOC. No. She was. She was holding it. There's a difference. Holding the room the way she once held entire units on broken radios and bleeding hope, refusing to let panic crack through steel. The SEAL captain watched her jaw tight, eyes distant. He had seen this version of her once before. Covered in dust, face streaked with sweat and grit, voice calm as artillery walked across ridgelines. Whitaker, he said softly, you don't owe this base anything. She kept her eyes on the map. They're soldiers. So were the men you saved. So were the ones you lost. Her breath caught just once. Pain flickered, real, sharp, living behind ribs like an old wound that never fully healed. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. It might tear her open. This isn't that valley, she whispered. No, he agreed, but your pulse is the same. She hated how true that felt. Her father's words again, steady, ghost-like. Right tool, right hands save lives. Her father used radios too. Cursed enemy chatter in humid jungles. Prayed static didn't mean death. He told her once that warriors don't all fire bullets. Some fight by refusing to let silence swallow the living. Tonight she fought like him. A sudden voice cut through comms, tight, scared, hiding it poorly. South Tower there inside the wire. The room jolted. Officers cursed. Hands reached for rifles. Sarah didn't panic. Her breathing slowed, not calm, but calculation sharpening like a blade. Tower confirm, she demanded. A beat. 2. Then. Negative, negative, not inside. Shadow slipped outside fence, must have been trying to bait us. Someone slammed a fist on a table. They're testing the perimeter. No, Sarah murmured. They're reading us, seeing if we break formation. Because enemy fighters don't need to breach walls. Sometimes they just need you to fear that they might. Fear does the work for them. She keyed another channel. All towers maintain discipline. No spotlights. No firing unless engaged first. Then softer. And breathe. Don't let them control your heartbeat. A Marine sergeant exhaled like she'd given him oxygen. For some reason, that hurt her more than fear ever had. The SEAL captain leaned in close, voice barely above breath. You know you just talked 20 armed men out of panic, right? I told them to breathe, she said. Exactly. She didn't answer. Because inside her stomach, something twisted, recognition of herself. Not as she was now, but as she once was. Young. Sharp-eyed. Steady-handed. Trusted with lives she had no right to bear so young. A girl with a radio, and the weight of God in her voice. One she never asked to carry, but carried anyway until she broke in silence. Someone cleared their throat. It was the Lieutenant Malone. The one she sent instead of going herself. Face damp with sweat, jaw clenched with pressure, trying not to show he'd been overwhelmed running radios outside the tent. He walked up slowly, almost cautiously. I need your help, he said quietly. Everyone heard anyway. Sarah looked at him, searching his expression. He wasn't embarrassed to ask. He wasn't pretentious. He wasn't mocking. He simply knew when he was in over his head. And that, more than loud bravery, was real strength. She stepped forward one slow step. Every instinct pulled tight. Not toward ego. Toward duty. But duty wasn't simple anymore. Her voice came quietly. "Are you sure you want me to? People talk when someone steps in without rank." Malone shook his head. At this point, he glanced around the tent, where Marines and officers watched her like she was the anchor holding them to earth. "I care more about not sending soldiers home in bags than how I look." She studied him, truly studied. Some men learn war by noise. Others learn it by humility. She nodded once. "Soft. Decisive. I'll assist. Not take over. Assist. A choice. A boundary. A thread between who she was and who she's trying to be." Malone exhaled, relief deep enough to shake him. The SEAL captain whispered, half-smile ghosting his lips. "You act like you're afraid of becoming yourself again." She didn't deny it. Sometimes the battlefield isn't outside, it's inside. And Sarah Whitaker wasn't just fighting insurgents tonight. She was fighting gravity. The gravity of who she had been. The gravity of why she stopped. The gravity of returning to the voice that once commanded death and saved life in equal measure. She keyed the mic slowly, deliberately, like reaching into fire with bare hands. "South Overwatch, shift 2 degrees east. Cover blind zone. Maintain silence until they commit." Her tone changed, not louder. Just deeper. Settled. Resolute. A soldier who once whispered coordinates through blood was speaking again. A private near the back whispered, trembling. "She's not just comms. She's command." He was wrong. She wasn't command. She was a soldier who once tasted command and chose to live quietly afterward. She set the mic down, slow, careful, as if placing weight rather than metal. Inside her chest, something cracked, not breaking. Opening. Her voice was steady when she spoke again. "They'll try again. They always do. Patience wins more fights than bullets." The tent listened. Every one of them. Every rank. Even fear listened. Malone, younger and learning, nodded like she was scripture. The SEAL captain looked at her like memory and respect lived behind his eyes forever. And for a moment, brief, fragile, breathtaking, she didn't feel invisible. She felt necessary. Danger still simmered outside. Silence still coiled inside. But Sarah Whitaker stood in the middle, a bridge between fear and action, between past and present, between hiding and stepping into the light she never wanted, but may no longer be able to avoid. Tonight she wasn't Cable Girl. She wasn't Forgotten JTAC. She wasn't Ghost. Tonight she was the voice holding chaos at bay. And tomorrow might ask more of her. And she wasn't yet sure which was scarier. Becoming who she was again. Or realizing she never stopped being her. She heard the sand before she heard the voices. Wind dragging grains across metal. A distant clatter of loose gravel kicked by hurried boots. Then the short, clipped radio burst. One only seasoned ears recognized as fear held behind military discipline. South Sector movement confirmed. Eyes on multiple figures, unknown weapons, holding fire. Holding fire. Always the hardest command. It meant we see you, but we won't blink first. Sarah stood perfectly still, headset pressed against her ear, breathing steady. Not calm, controlled. Calm is peace. Control is survival. She didn't flinch when another alarm blinked. Didn't jump at the muffled clank of a weapon being loaded 2 tents away. Didn't react when a nervous private asked, "Ma'am, should we?" "Don't call me ma'am," she cut quietly. Titles created distance. Distance created heroes. Heroes die. She preferred ghosts. The night outside deepened, moonlight smudged behind desert haze. The perimeter lights hummed faint yellow, casting thin halos across wire coils and hesitating sand. Movement again. Closer. Purposeful. The SEAL captain stood beside her, arms crossed, body relaxed but eyes sharp, like a wolf pretending to nap near a cave mouth. "You hear that?" he murmured. "I hear 3, she replied. 3 people." She shook her head. 3 intentions. That confused a nearby Marine. But the captain nodded, understanding drilled from deployments stacked on deployments. There are footsteps that wander. There are footsteps that watch. And there are footsteps that approach. These were approaching. The Lieutenant Malone fumbled slightly with his radio. His voice cracked, trying to sound older than his fear. "What do we do?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. A soldier once told her, "Answer too fast and you're reacting. Answer too slow and you're lying." She chose neither. She listened. Static hummed. Desert air pressed still. No gunfire yet, which meant patience still held. "They aren't breaching," she said at last. "They're studying the perimeter, looking for your reactions, cataloging response times." Malone swallowed. "How do you know?" She didn't look at him. Patterns don't change, just geography. He nodded like he understood, but he didn't. Not yet. The SEAL captain did. He once watched her do this not on a base, but on a ridgeline with gunpowder on her tongue and sweat turning dust into mud under her armor. He whispered, remembering. "You read the ground like scripture." She didn't respond. Silence was easier than ghosts. Then a crackle. TOC shadow movement on the east sector too. 2, maybe 3 silhouettes, coordinated. Everyone turned toward Sarah again. Even officers twice her rank. Even enlisted who mocked her days ago. Fear makes people remember humility. Her shoulders tensed just once, like a wire pulled taut under weight. "They're testing multiple angles," she murmured, "looking for weak spots, not committing yet." A young Marine whispered too loudly, "Why don't they just attack?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "They don't need to storm your walls if they can break your nerves. War isn't always bullets. Sometimes it's pressure. Slow, relentless, suffocating." The SEAL captain stepped closer. "Say the word and we take a team out." Her eyes flicked to his. "No." "Why?" "Because they want us to leave the wire. They want to stretch us thin, bleed us in the open, one squad at a time." He blew out a breath. Damn. He wasn't doubting her. He was remembering. Because years ago, she saved his platoon from an ambush exactly like this. Pinned. Cut off. Watching dust rise on 2 ridgelines at once, while radios died one by one. Until only her voice cut through chaos. Her body may have left the valley, but parts of her still lived there. And tonight the valley whispered again. A new voice, radioed and tight with adrenaline, but steady. "South Tower, they've stopped moving, holding positions at 400 meters." Another call. "East Sector, same, they're watching us." Watching. Waiting. Predators don't rush prey that stands ready. They wait until prey doubts itself. "Hold positions," Sarah said. "Do not engage unless they breach or fire first." Copy. She exhaled deep, long, and for the first time tonight, her hand trembled slightly. Not from fear. From memory. The tent lights flickered above her. Someone murmured a prayer 2 tables away. And then quiet. Quiet so thick it pressed against skin like humid air before monsoon rain. A quiet too many soldiers confuse with safety. Malone broke it. "Where'd you learn to do this?" he asked softly. "All of it." Finally she turned. Not fully. Just enough to meet his eyes. She could lie. She could say training, manuals, years in signal school. She could say field drills, leadership exercises. But lies waste breath. And she didn't waste breath anymore. I learned in a place where nobody was coming if I got it wrong. The tent froze. That wasn't a motto. It wasn't bravado. It was truth sharpened to a blade. You mean your unit? Malone whispered. No. Her eyes lowered, not in shame, but in remembrance. Not everyone with a radio stands beside a platoon, she said softly. Sometimes you stand alone between men who need air support and silence that wants them dead. The Marine near her swallowed. Did they make it out? She stared at the floor. Her voice came slow, honest, painful. Not all of them. Not all of them. 3 words. 3 graves worth of weight. No one spoke. Even radios seemed to hold breath. The SEAL captain closed his eyes, not pity. Recognition. He knew that tone. He carried graveyards behind his ribs, too. She continued, not loud, not proud. My job wasn't to fight. My job was to make sure they lived long enough to fight. When I failed, I did not fail quietly. No theatrics. No emotion cracked through. Just truth, smooth and razor-edged. And truth always cuts. Malone stepped closer, voice softened by guilt and realization. That's why you didn't want to step in tonight. She didn't deny it. Didn't nod. Didn't speak. She simply let that truth sit heavy in the air. Some people fear dying. Some fear killing. Some fear remembering. She feared all 3. A sudden radio crack jolted them. Movement retreating, they're backing off both sectors. Relief rippled. A few exhales trembled. Someone whispered, "Thank God." But Sarah's eyes narrowed, scanning the dark beyond the wire. "No," she murmured, "they didn't retreat." The SEAL captain's jaw clenched. "Recon pull." Exactly. The enemy hadn't run. They had learned. And they would return smarter. "Prep overwatch drones at first light," she said. "They'll come back from a different angle." Malone nodded vigorously, learning humility fast. But Sarah stayed still. Too still. Her shoulders dropped slowly, not relaxation, but surrender to gravity. "You all right?" the captain asked. She inhaled. Exhaled. Tonight felt like yesterday. "Helmand. Everywhere," she whispered. Then her voice cracked, barely audible but real. "I thought I buried that part of me." The captain didn't offer comfort. He knew she didn't want it. He offered truth. "You didn't bury it, you protected it." Her jaw trembled. Just once. Then her expression went still again, a soldier sealing emotion like a letter you can never send. A private near her, one who once laughed at her, stepped forward awkwardly. "Corporal, I just want to say." She cut him off gently. "You don't need to." "I do," he insisted, cheeks red, voice trembling. "We were wrong, we didn't know." "You weren't supposed to know," she said quietly. "That was the point." Confusion flickered. Then understanding. She wasn't hiding because she was ashamed. She was hiding because survival sometimes means choosing silence over reverence. The captain stepped closer, voice a low rumble. "You think staying small keeps you safe?" She didn't argue. He continued. "But it also keeps everyone else blind. And you were built for the light." Her eyes hardened. "I wasn't built." She tapped her chest once soft. "I was broken into it." Silence. Sharp. Painful. And true. A soft alarm chirped, low threat level. A signal that perimeter movement was gone. For now. People exhaled. The room loosened. Shoulders dropped. But Sarah didn't move. She stared at the radio like it was a doorway, and she wasn't ready to walk through it again. Finally Malone spoke, hesitant, sincere. "Rest, Corporal. You've done more than enough tonight." She turned slowly, eyes tired, voice small but unshaken. I didn't do anything. You kept us steady, he said. That made her smile, a bitter, fragile, private smile. I kept myself steady, she corrected. You kept yourself safe. It mattered to her, the distinction. Strength wasn't what she gave them. Strength was what she didn't take away. She walked toward her silent corner, dropping into her chair like it was the only place gravity didn't hurt. Her fingers found her father's screwdriver again. Warm metal. Old comfort. Burial marker for a childhood before radios, coordinates and ghosts with bullet wounds. Her dog tags shifted against her chest, his dog tags beside them. She whispered, not praying, not speaking to anyone in the room. It never really ends, does it? The SEAL captain answered for the universe. No, he said quietly, but the quiet between battles gets longer, that's the reward. She didn't believe him. Not yet. But she wanted to. And wanting. That was a start. Outside, dawn began to bleed pale light into the sky, washing the desert in ghost blue. Inside, soldiers stared at her, not awestruck, not intimidated but altered. They had seen a soldier tonight. Not a cable tech. Not a rumor. Not a whisper. A soldier who fought wars without firing a shot. A soldier who returned from hell and still whispered calm into chaos. A soldier who carried loss like a spine, straight, strong, uncomplaining. And a woman who, for the first time in a long time, was realizing she might not be allowed to stay invisible much longer. Some battles find you again. Not to break you, but to remind you who you really are. And Sarah wasn't done being reminded. She thought the dawn would feel like relief. It didn't. The first rays crept across the wire and spilled over HESCO barriers, turning the base gold and dust rose. Soldiers stretched stiff limbs, rubbing out a night spent staring at shadows. Someone laughed nervously near the motor pool, one of those post-adrenaline laughs that means we survived, but my bones are still shaking. The hum of morning generators rumbled. Mess tent doors clanged open. Life pretended to return to normal. But nothing was normal now. Not for them. Not for her. Sarah sat alone at her console, headset resting beside her, eyes half-lidded not from fatigue, but from remembering how to breathe like someone who belonged in peace. Every few seconds, she felt someone glance at her. Not the mocking eyes she knew well. New ones. Uneasy. Wide. Respectful, but also curious in the way people fear what they don't understand. The kind of eyes that try to solve a puzzle they were blind to just days ago. She hated it. Silence was her armor, and recognition stripped it away thread by thread. A bootstep approached, firm, confident, not uncertain or hesitant. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The SEAL captain had a gait like memory chasing him, solid, weary, unwilling to pretend at lightness. You slept? He asked quietly. No. Me either. They didn't exchange sympathy. Veterans rarely do. Sympathy feels like pity when you've seen war up close. Understanding feels truer. He lowered his voice. Intel wants to review the night. They'll likely want you there. She didn't move. I'm comms. You were more than comms last night. That wasn't intention, it was necessity. Same thing. She finally looked up, exhaustion tucked behind stubborn composure. Do not speak for me. His brow tightened, not offended but concerned. Then speak for yourself, he said. She didn't respond, because she didn't know if she still knew how. He studied her face a beat longer, recognizing that haunted grip of someone who hadn't decided whether stepping forward again was strength or relapse. Before either could speak, the tent flap burst aside. An officer strode in crisp uniform, cold eyes, tablet in hand. He moved with the arrogance of someone who had read about war more than lived it. Intelligence branch, high rank, low humility. His gaze swept the room, dismissing every face until it landed on hers. "Corporal Whitaker," he said, not asked, announced. She stood slowly. A practice motion, controlled. Her father's dog tags pressed cold against her chest. "Yes, sir." He didn't return courtesy. He held up a tablet, glare reflecting off the screen. "I ran your service record." A ripple went through the tent, quiet, heavy. She didn't blink. Of course he did. He continued, voice edged like a scalpel. "Combat deployment prior to this assignment, attached to Joint Task Force, no public record." Silence. A cloth being pulled off a hidden statue. He studied her like she offended him simply by existing under his radar. "You received a commendation for classified action," he read. "No medal ceremony, no official recognition, just a sealed citation and reassignment." He looked up, brows narrow. "Why the secrecy?" The room waited. Sarah stared back, face flat, tone still. "You tell me, you're the one reading the file." A few Marines tried not to smile at her answer. Humor wasn't her intention, but truth sometimes cuts in unexpected directions. He stepped closer, irritation thinly veiled. "You could have been an officer by now. You could have led Special Operations Communications. You had command recommendation." "I declined." "Why?" "One life was enough." He frowned. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. "Not yet." He flipped to another page. Psych eval notes, transition difficulty, adjustment concerns, combat stress indicators. He paused, waiting for her to look weak. She didn't give him the satisfaction. "Why hide in a calm tent?" he pressed. "Hiding implies fear." "Then what is it?" "Choice." He scoffed. "Everyone wants glory until it comes." Her gaze sharpened, quiet steel. "I never wanted glory." He opened his mouth, ready to dismiss, to belittle, to mold her into the convenient narrative his rank allowed him to believe. But the SEAL captain's voice cut through the tension, low, dangerous. "Watch your tone." The intel officer turned, annoyed. "She's a corporal, she answers questions." The captain stepped forward, calm and lethal as a loaded rifle. "She saved my men when comms fell apart in Helmand. 4 hours under fire. No support. No air cover until she carved a corridor through chaos with nothing but her voice." The intel officer paused, discomfort flickering. The captain continued, not loud, but with the weight of men buried beneath sand. "You weren't there, I was, so if she chooses peace, she earned it." Still, the intel officer couldn't let go. "So you walked away from battlefield relevance for what? To fix radios for enlisted." Sarah's body went perfectly still. Not stiff still. The stillness of someone deciding whether to speak truth or stay hidden forever. Her voice came quiet, measured, devastating. "I walked away," she said, "because after you guide jets onto targets where your friends are pinned, after you hear men go silent one by one, after you key a mic knowing the world is burning where you send it." A pause. A breath as sharp as a blade. "You don't hunt war, war hunts you." The tent stayed frozen. She continued, eyes boring into his without blinking. "I did my time. I lost people who still visit me when the room goes quiet. I carried an entire valley's fear and hope in a headset until my bones shook." Her voice softened, not weak but heavy with truth. "I didn't leave war, I survived it." Silence sucked the breath from the room. The intel officer looked at her like he didn't know whether to reprimand or salute. "You think we don't need you out there?" he asked quietly. She looked past him, past the tent, past the base, back into fire and dust and radio static that hummed like ghosts whispering names. "I think," she said slowly, "you need someone who chooses to go, not someone who goes because she forgot she had a choice." He blinked, and in that moment he realized something. She wasn't broken. She was protecting herself. And sometimes that's the hardest war of all. Before he could speak again, a sudden alarm blared short, sharp. Bass-wide broadcast tone. Everyone reached for radios at once. Incoming field team returning early, wounded on board, possible contact en route back. Movement. Rushing feet. Urgency exploding like shrapnel through calm. The intel officer stepped aside instinctively as personnel scrambled. Malone looked at her, breath quickened, eyes wide. "Corporal." She already had the headset in her hand. No hesitation. No wavering. She did not rise to rank. She rose to need. Because healing doesn't mean hiding forever. Sometimes healing means choosing when to step back into fire. Sarah keyed the mic. "Field team, this is TOC. Say status and injuries." A voice responded, strained, panicked, breathing like pain. "3 wounded, 1 critical, bleeding bad, request immediate medical." Sarah glanced at medical. They were already running. She didn't need to order, they knew. She asked instead the question that mattered. "Are you being followed?" Silence. Then, "Don't know." She lowered the mic slowly. This wasn't done. Danger hadn't passed. The battle outside would return. The battle inside her already had. She could feel eyes on her again, waiting, needing, believing. And fear trembled deep in her bones because she knew the truth. War doesn't let go gently. It pulls you back. Peace. Bye. Peace. But when the world chooses you in its darkest hour, how long can you stay in shadows before stepping into the light again? Sarah closed her eyes, inhaled, exhaled, and whispered to herself, not prayer, not doubt, just truth she had carried for years. "I don't want to be a legend." Then she opened her eyes. "But I don't let people die." That was her curse. And her grace. And now everyone knew. Why was her heart steady when everything else trembled? The medevac siren cut through the base like a blade. Dust spun in frantic curls as soldiers sprinted toward the landing pad. Voices shouted, boots pounded, stretchers clattered. Panic is loud. Duty is louder. Sarah didn't run. She walked fast, deliberate, headset clipped to her collar. Eyes fixed ahead like the morning light was something she owed an answer to. A hum filled her ears, not from the engines but from memory. Rotor chop layered over voices from another life. "Whitaker, keep them alive. We're holding, just hold with us. Don't let us disappear." Not ghosts to scare her. Ghosts that asked her to witness them. To not let the world forget their breath. She would not. She reached the pad as the Osprey descended, its downdraft hitting her like heat in history. Dust blasted across uniforms and faces. No one blinked. Broken bodies have a gravity that pulls every eye, every breath, every heartbeat. Ramp down. Stretcher out. A Marine was screaming, not loud, but in pain that sounded like surrender trying not to break. Sarah didn't look away. She stepped forward, grabbed the IV bag from a stumbling medic, lifted it higher. Not dramatic. Not heroic. Practical. Human. "Pulse?" she asked. Thready, losing blood fast. Doctors rushed. Corpsmen shouted. Someone's hand shook as they pressed gauze to an open wound. "Pressure. Clamp here. More saline now." Chaos, but the skilled kind. the kind that exists where dying refuses to be easy. Sarah stayed steady, not in charge, not giving orders. Present. Sometimes presence saves more than orders ever will. The wounded Marine's eyes fluttered, unfocused, searching. He wasn't looking for a medic. He was looking for permission. To quit. To fall. To slip into the quiet where pain finally stops. Sarah leaned closer, voice low, unwavering. Stay here, just breathe. That's your whole job, one breath at a time. His lip trembled. Tears mixed with dust. Hurts. I know. A whisper steady as steel. And you're still here. That means you're winning. A medic glanced at her, surprised at the command in her tone, then didn't question it. The Marine's breathing steadied. Not because she healed him, but because she believed he could survive long enough to be healed. Sometimes survival begins in the space between two people who refuse to give up at the same time. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, the bleeding slowed, bandages held, morphine eased the shaking. The Marine was carried toward the infirmary. He lived, and everyone who touched him knew it could have tipped either way. Sarah exhaled long and slow, the way a mountain exhales fog after a storm. She turned, and the base froze. The SEAL captain was standing 3 steps behind her. Saluting. Not casual. Not friendly. Formal. Deep. As if honoring not just her, but those she carried within her. Air thinned. Sound shrank. Even dust seemed to hang still. He held the salute like a man repaying a debt he never forgot he owed. And then one by one it happened. A corporal near the ambulance straightened and saluted. A medic paused, blood still on gloves, and saluted. A pilot resting against the airframe saluted. Marines walking by stopped, turned, saluted. Not everyone knew the story, but they saw the moment. Respect doesn't need briefing papers. Malone swallowed hard, eyes wet, and stood at attention, his salute shaky but full. Even the intel officer, stiff, pride cracked open enough to let truth in, lifted his hand. Sarah didn't move. Her throat tightened, eyes glimmering but unspilled. This wasn't praise. Wasn't celebration. It was acknowledgement. For battles fought in silence. For burdens carried without audience. For the ones who didn't come home, but lived through her. She shook her head just once, tiny, broken motion. You don't salute ghosts, she whispered. The captain lowered his hand slowly, reverently. You're not a ghost, he said. Ghosts haunt, you held the line. She looked away, toward the rising sun washing the desert in gold and blood orange. I didn't hold the line, I just didn't let it drown me. He stepped beside her. That's what holding looks like sometimes. Silence fell again. Not heavy, whole. She finally spoke, voice soft enough only he heard. I don't want to go back. You're not going back, he said. You're going forward, there's a difference. Her jaw clenched, a tremor of emotion caught between grief and relief. Will it ever stop, she asked. He didn't lie to her. No, but it will feel lighter, and when it doesn't. She nodded once. I know, one breath at a time. He offered a small, tired smile. There she is. She closed her eyes. Not to escape, to ground herself. When she opened them, the sun had risen fully. A new day. Another one she didn't expect years ago. Another one she would not waste by hiding. She turned toward the base. Toward duty without chains. Toward a life she never thought she'd allow herself again. If anyone looked closely, they'd see it. The faintest shift in her stance, not armor on, but armor set down. She didn't need to be legendary. Legends are monuments. She wanted to be human. Broken. healing, useful, present, and most of all, alive. She walked forward, voice steady as morning wind. Let's work, radios don't fix themselves. And just like that, the spell broke. People exhaled, smiled, wiped eyes before anyone noticed. Life resumed. Not the same. Better. Because now they knew. Strength isn't loud. Power isn't forceful. Heroes don't always shout. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.